Have you ever wondered what happens when the person sworn to heal becomes the one who destroys? In the gleaming towers of Singapore, where medical excellence meets cutting-edge technology, one woman's curiosity would lead her into a nightmare hidden behind sterile white walls. What began as a dream job would end in a discovery so horrific that even seasoned investigators would struggle to sleep at night. This is the story of how trust became a death sentence, and how one nurse's courage would expose a monster wearing a doctor's coat. On the morning of September 23, 2022, the residents of Singapore's prestigious Orchard Road Medical District awoke to an unusual commotion outside the Sinclair Advanced Medical Institute. Police vehicles lined the street with a precision that suggested something far more sinister than a routine investigation. Inside the building's restricted basement level, forensic teams documented a scene that would haunt them for years to come. The body of 32-year-old Rosa Santos, a Filipino nurse beloved by colleagues and patients alike, lay crumpled in a maintenance corridor that wasn't supposed to exist. Her eyes were wide with a terror that spoke of horrors witnessed in humanity's darkest corners, and scattered around her were medical records that would unravel one of Southeast Asia's most sophisticated medical murder operations. Singapore in 2022 represented the pinnacle of healthcare innovation. The city-state's medical tourism industry generated over $3 billion annually, attracting wealthy patients from across Asia seeking treatments unavailable or unreliable in their home countries. With a healthcare system ranked among the world's best and medical professionals trained to exacting standards, Singapore's hospitals gleamed with the promise of life-saving miracles. The Sinclair Advanced Medical Institute embodied this excellence. Occupying 12 floors of a glass and steel tower in the heart of the medical district, the facility specialized in experimental treatments for terminal illnesses. Cancer patients who had exhausted conventional options, individuals with rare genetic disorders, wealthy elderly seeking life extension therapies, all came to Sinclair seeking hope when traditional medicine offered none. Behind this facade of healing operated a man whose reputation seemed beyond reproach. Dr. Marcus Lim was Singapore's golden boy of medical innovation. At 48, he held positions on government health advisory boards, had published over 200 peer-reviewed papers, and lectured at medical conferences across 3 continents. His clinic's success rate for treating supposedly terminal conditions bordered on miraculous, earning him the whispered nickname, the Resurrector, among grateful patients and their families. Dr. Lim's personal life appeared equally exemplary. Married to a former beauty queen turned philanthropist, father to 2 accomplished children studying at Cambridge and Stanford, resident of a $12 million penthouse overlooking Marina Bay. He donated generously to medical charities, mentored young doctors, and spoke eloquently about the sacred duty of physicians to ease suffering. His patients described him as compassionate, brilliant, and wholly dedicated to their survival. Into this world of medical prestige stepped Rosa Santos, carrying dreams woven from sacrifice and determination. Born in 1990 in Iloilo City, Philippines, Rosa had grown up watching her grandmother die slowly from diabetes complications that proper medical care might have prevented. The experience crystallized her life's purpose at age 12. She would become a nurse, and she would save lives that poverty and inadequate healthcare systems routinely discarded. Her path to Singapore had been paved with relentless effort. Graduating top of her nursing class at West Visayas State University, working double shifts at Manila's overcrowded public hospitals, studying for international certification exams by flashlight during power outages. Every sacrifice aimed toward a single goal, securing a position at one of Singapore's prestigious medical facilities where her skills could flourish and her salary could transform her family's circumstances back home. When the offer from Sinclair Advanced Medical Institute arrived in March 2022, Rosa had wept with joy. The salary of $4,800 monthly represented more than 4 times what she earned in Manila, enough to send her younger siblings to university, to renovate her parents' deteriorating home, to finally lift her family from the grinding poverty that had defined 3 generations. Her mother had kissed her forehead at Manila airport, whispering prayers in Tagalog that her daughter would remain safe in the foreign city of glass and steel. Rosa arrived in Singapore with 2 suitcases, a rosary that had belonged to her grandmother, and an unshakable faith that hard work and integrity would be rewarded with success. The dormitory provided by the hospital in Jailang district was small but clean, shared with 3 other Filipino nurses who quickly became her surrogate family. During those first weeks, Singapore felt like paradise. Efficient public transport, safe streets at any hour, shopping malls so vast and air-conditioned they seemed like cities unto themselves. The Sinclair Institute itself exceeded her expectations. Everything gleamed with obsessive cleanliness. Equipment came from Germany and Japan, representing the latest medical technology. The staff spoke in hushed, professional tones that conveyed the seriousness of their life-and-death work. During her orientation, Dr. Lim himself had welcomed the new nurses, his gentle smile and soft-spoken manner immediately putting them at ease. "You are not merely employees," he had told them, his eyes seeming to hold genuine warmth. "You are partners in the sacred work of preserving life. Every patient who walks through our doors has been told they are beyond hope. We prove that assessment wrong. We give them back their futures." Rosa's initial assignments involved standard oncology ward duties, administering chemotherapy, monitoring vital signs, providing comfort to patients enduring brutal treatment protocols. She excelled immediately, her natural compassion and meticulous attention to detail earning praise from supervising physicians. Patients requested her specifically, finding solace in her gentle Filipina accent and her ability to anticipate their needs before they voiced them. Within 2 months, Rosa had been promoted to Dr. Lim's personal surgical team, a prestigious position usually reserved for nurses with years of seniority at the institute. Her colleagues congratulated her warmly, though a few of the more experienced nurses offered curious glances that Rosa couldn't quite interpret. One older Chinese nurse named Mei had pulled her aside during a break, speaking in carefully chosen words. "Dr. Lim's team is a great honor," Mei had said, her voice neutral but her eyes conveying something else. "Just remember that some doors in this hospital are kept locked for good reasons. Curiosity here is not rewarded." At the time, Rosa had dismissed the cryptic warning as jealousy or perhaps cultural differences in workplace communication. She was too excited about the opportunity to question the shadows lurking at its edges. The promotion came with a 20% salary increase and access to the Institute's most advanced surgical suites, where Dr. Lim performed his experimental procedures. These operations occurred in Building C's 4th-floor operating theaters, restricted areas requiring special biometric clearance. Rosa's first day assisting Dr. Lim revealed surgical technique that bordered on artistry. His hands moved with absolute precision. His voice remained calm even during complications. His decisions carried the weight of decades of experience. The patient that day was a 58-year-old Malaysian businessman with stage 4 pancreatic cancer, given 3 months to live by conventional oncologists. Dr. Lim's experimental protocol involved targeted gene therapy combined with aggressive tumor removal. The A-Tower surgery concluded successfully, and the patient was transferred to intensive care with vital signs that suggested genuine improvement. Over the following weeks, Rosa assisted in a dozen similar procedures. Terminal cancer patients, individuals with degenerative neurological conditions, elderly patients seeking controversial life extension treatments. Each surgery showcased Dr. Lim's brilliance, and each patient showed initial signs of remarkable recovery. The success rate seemed almost supernatural. But as weeks became months, Rosa began noticing peculiarities that her meticulous nursing training flagged as inconsistent. Patients who had recovered well from surgery would be transferred to what Dr. Lim called extended observation, private rooms on Building C's basement level where only senior staff had access. These patients were removed from the regular nursing rotation, their care handled exclusively by Dr. Lim and a small team of nurses who worked irregular hours and never socialized with other staff. When Rosa inquired about these basement patients during team meetings, the responses were uniform and practiced. "They're in delicate experimental phases," Dr. Lim would explain with his characteristic gentle smile. "The protocols require isolation to prevent infection and ensure accurate data collection. Your concern for patient welfare is admirable, Rosa, but trust that they're receiving optimal care." Yet the patients never seemed to return to regular wards or be discharged home. Medical records would simply close with notations of "transferred to long-term care facility" or "continued treatment abroad," destinations that remained frustratingly vague. Rosa tried to dismiss her growing unease. Singapore's medical system was highly regulated, subject to rigorous oversight. Surely, if anything improper were occurring, authorities would intervene. Dr. Lim's reputation was impeccable, his credentials beyond question. Her concerns probably reflected unfamiliarity with Singaporean medical protocols or cultural misunderstandings about patient privacy practices. But late at night in her dormitory bed, Rosa's grandmother's voice echoed in memory. "Mija," she had often said, "evil rarely announces itself with horns and pitchfork. It comes wearing the face of respectability, speaking words of comfort, offering help to the desperate. Always trust your instincts when something feels wrong, no matter how good it appears." The warning that should have saved Rosa came on September 18th during a routine surgical prep. Dr. Lim had been called away to an emergency consultation, leaving his tablet computer on the scrub room counter. The device lit up with an incoming message, the preview visible on the locked screen. "Family confirmed payment. Subject ready for processing in room B7. Dispose by Friday." Rosa's blood ran cold. The language, subject, processing, dispose, belonged to waste management or laboratory experiments, not patient care. Her hands trembled as she tried to rationalize innocent explanations. Perhaps it was veterinary research, experimental protocols on tissue samples, some administrative communication she lacked context to properly interpret. When Dr. Lim returned moments later, his eyes immediately went to the tablet, then to Rosa's face. Whatever he saw there, shock, confusion, the beginning of realization, caused his expression to shift almost imperceptibly. The warm mentor's smile remained, but something cold flickered behind his eyes like a shark passing beneath tropical waters. "Rosa," he said softly, "you look troubled. Is everything all right?" She forced herself to smile, to nod, to perform normalcy despite the fear crystallizing in her chest. "Just tired, Dr. Lim. The long shifts are catching up with me." He studied her for a moment that stretched toward eternity, then nodded slowly. "Make sure you rest properly. We need you at your best." The words sounded like concern, but felt like warning. That evening, Rosa couldn't eat the dinner her dormitory mates had prepared. She lay awake replaying every surgery, every patient transfer, every vague explanation about the mysterious basement observation rooms. The pieces were forming a picture too horrific to fully accept, yet too consistent to dismiss. By dawn, she had made a decision that would seal her fate. She would find room B7. She would discover what processing and disposal meant in the context of human patients. And if her darkest suspicions were correct, she would expose the truth regardless of personal cost. Some doors, Nurse Mei had warned, are kept locked for good reasons. Rosa was about to discover that some doors lock people in, while others lock horrors away from discovery. And the key she carried, granted during her promotion to Dr. Lim's surgical team, would unlock both. The opportunity came during the night shift on September 22nd. Rosa had volunteered to cover for a colleague, knowing that Building C's overnight staffing dropped to skeleton crews. Security protocols were more relaxed after midnight, with fewer administrators present to monitor keycard access logs. The building's basement level officially contained storage facilities, maintenance equipment, and environmental control systems, functional spaces rarely visited except by janitorial and engineering staff. At 2, 7:47 a.m., after completing her regular patient rounds, Rosa approached the basement access elevator. Her keycard, which granted entry to surgical floors, shouldn't technically open basement levels. But weeks earlier, she had noticed that senior surgical nurses carried cards with broader access, likely to retrieve specialized equipment stored in basement archives. During a particularly hectic surgery, a senior nurse had left her card on the supply counter. Rosa had borrowed it just long enough to make a quick impression in the soft plastic of an eraser, a trick her brother had taught her from watching spy movies. Using that impression and a replacement card obtained from the administrative office by claiming hers was demagnetized, Rosa now possessed unauthorized access to restricted areas. The elevator descended with mechanical precision, its digital display counting down floor numbers until reaching B3, the lowest basement level. The doors opened onto a corridor that felt fundamentally different from the hospital's upper floors. No natural light penetrated here, only fluorescent tubes that cast everything in harsh, clinical white. The air smelled of industrial disinfectant mixed with something else, a chemical odor Rosa's nursing experience identified as formaldehyde, the preservative used for biological specimens. The corridor stretched 30 meters before branching into multiple directions, each marked with alphanumeric designations rather than descriptive signs. Room B7 would be in the western branch, if the building's layout followed standard architectural logic. Rosa moved quietly, her soft-soled nursing shoes making no sound on the polished concrete floor. Every 20 meters, security cameras tracked her movements, but she had timed this exploration for the security guard's documented bathroom break, a 15-minute window when monitoring became lax. She found room B7 behind an unmarked steel door equipped with both keycard access and a biometric scanner. Her stolen card granted access, but the fingerprint scanner represented an obstacle she couldn't overcome. Rosa stood frozen, considering whether to retreat, when she heard voices approaching from an intersecting corridor. Panicking, she tried the door handle and found it unlocked, left open by whatever staff had last used the room. She slipped inside, easing the door closed just as shadows appeared in the hallway. The room that Rosa entered would haunt her for the remaining 6 days of her life. It was configured like a surgical suite, but wrong in fundamental ways. Standard operating theaters are designed for saving lives, bright lights, monitoring equipment, everything positioned for optimal patient care. This room was designed for the opposite. The operating table bore restraints at wrist and ankle positions. Surgical tools were arranged with the same precision as upstairs, but their selection suggested procedures that disregarded patient survival. Most horrifying was the far wall, which featured a large industrial furnace of the type used for medical waste incineration. But this furnace was vastly oversized for standard biohazard disposal, and its control panel indicated operational temperatures far exceeding what would be necessary for destroying tissue samples or used materials. Adjacent to the furnace stood a stainless steel table bearing documentation that Rosa's shaking hands lifted into the light. Medical records, but unlike any she had seen in legitimate hospital settings. Patient names were replaced with numerical codes. Treatment outcomes were noted in detached, scientific language. Subject 847, organ viability maintained for 72 hours post-cessation. Liver and kidneys harvested successfully. Remaining biological material disposed 9/15/2022. The records detailed dozens of patients, their treatment timelines following a horrifying pattern. Terminal patients would undergo Dr. Lim's experimental surgeries, which were apparently genuine attempts at treatment. But when those treatments failed, as many experimental protocols inevitably do, instead of allowing natural death and proper burial, patients were being systematically harvested. Their viable organs were extracted and sold through black market medical networks. Their bodies were then cremated in the basement furnace, with death certificates falsified to indicate transfer to other facilities. Rosa's hands clutched a document describing someone she recognized. The Malaysian businessman with pancreatic cancer, her first surgery with Dr. Lim. According to official records, he had been transferred to a long-term care facility in Kuala Lumpur. According to the papers Rosa now held, he had died 3 weeks after surgery from complications. His liver, kidneys, and corneas had been harvested and sold for a combined sum of $780,000. His body had been processed, and his family remained unaware, believing their father was recovering slowly at a private clinic. The scale of the operation staggered comprehension. Over 18 months, Dr. Lim had processed 47 patients, generating an estimated $23 million in illegal organ sales. Each victim was someone who had come to Sinclair Institute desperate and hopeful, trusting in Singapore's renowned medical system. Each family had paid substantial fees for experimental treatments, then unknowingly paid again with their loved ones' harvested organs. Rosa photographed everything with trembling hands, documents, the furnace, the surgical setup, the coded patient records. Her phone's camera seemed inadequate to capture the magnitude of horror she had uncovered, but she methodically documented every piece of evidence. She was texting the photos to her personal cloud storage when she heard the door's electronic lock engage with a decisive click. Dr. Marcus Lim stood in the doorway, no longer wearing the gentle mask of the compassionate physician. His expression carried something far colder, the detached assessment of a predator evaluating prey. "Rosa," he said softly, his voice carrying the same calm tone he used when delivering terminal diagnoses. "I had hoped you would be wiser than this, hoped that self-preservation would override your curiosity." He stepped fully into the room, and Rosa noticed he wasn't alone. 2 men in hospital security uniforms flanked him, their expressions suggesting this wasn't their first encounter with basement discoveries. "You're destroying evidence of murder," Rosa managed, her voice steadier than she felt. "These people trusted you, their families trusted you." Dr. Lim's smile was patient, almost pitying. "These people were dying already, Rosa. Terminal diagnosis, 0 survival probability. I gave them hope, gave their final months meaning. And when the inevitable occurred, I ensured their deaths contributed to saving others. Is that not beautiful symmetry?" "You murdered them," Rosa insisted. "The records show you withdrew life support prematurely, harvested organs from patients who could have survived longer." "Survived to what end?" Dr. Lim interrupted, his voice sharpening. "Months of agony, bankruptcy for their families, false hope that would only make the inevitable more painful." He moved closer, his shadow falling across the documents Rosa still clutched. "I created a system where everyone wins. Patients receive cutting-edge treatment. Families receive closure. Recipients receive life-saving organs that the official system's bureaucracy would have denied them. And yes, I receive compensation for facilitating these miracles. Where is the evil in that?" The sociopathic logic was so perfectly constructed that for a moment, Rosa could almost see how Dr. Lim had justified this to himself. But then she thought of the Malaysian businessman's family, still believing their father was recovering. She thought of the 47 others whose bodies had been reduced to ash and lies. "You're going to let me leave," Rosa said, hearing the uncertainty in her own voice. "I've sent evidence to multiple locations. If anything happens to me, it will be discovered." Dr. Lim's expression showed genuine regret, not for his crimes, but for the complication Rosa represented. "I believe you think that's true," he said gently. "But Rosa, you're exhausted from a long shift. You're going to have an unfortunate accident during your commute home. These things happen in such a busy city. Your death will be tragic but explainable, and the evidence you think you've secured will disappear as thoroughly as you will." The violence that followed was swift and calculated. Rosa fought with desperate strength born of certainty that submission meant death. She managed to trigger her phone's emergency alert, a feature that would send her location and audio recording to local police. But the security guards were practiced at this kind of containment, their movements suggesting this wasn't the first witness they had silenced. Rosa's final conscious thought, as hands closed around her throat and the room began dimming at its edges, was profound regret that she would never see her family again, never feel the Philippine sun on her face, never complete the good she had hoped to do in this world. Her grandmother's rosary, which she had carried in her scrub pocket, fell to the concrete floor with a soft click of wooden beads, a small sound that nonetheless echoed in the sterile basement silence. Dr. Marcus Lim watched impassively as Rosa's struggles weakened and finally stilled. Her body was carefully positioned in a maintenance corridor where discovery would seem accidental, a tragic fall during unauthorized exploration of restricted areas. But even in death, Rosa Santos had accomplished what mattered most. The emergency alert triggered by her phone had recorded Dr. Lim's confession. Police were already en route, summoned by the automated distress signal that had pinpointed her exact location in Building C's forbidden basement. By dawn on September 23rd, the truth would flood into the pristine corridors of the Sinclair Advanced Medical Institute, unstoppable as a rising tide. Rosa's courage would expose evil that had hidden behind medical excellence and hollow compassion. And her sacrifice would ensure that 47 voices, silenced by murder and cremation, would finally be heard. The investigation that followed Rosa Santos's death became Singapore's most extensive medical crime case in modern history. The initial response to her emergency alert had been routine, police expecting perhaps a lost maintenance worker or a confused patient who had wandered into restricted areas. What they discovered in Building C's basement shattered that assumption within minutes. Detective Inspector Chen Wei, first on scene, would later testify that the documentation surrounding Rosa's body told a story more devastating than any crime scene he had encountered in 22 years of police work. Dr. Lim's attempt to stage Rosa's death as accidental fell apart under immediate scrutiny. The audio recording from her emergency alert captured his full confession, his cold justification for systematic murder, his orders to the security guards to eliminate her. Within 90 minutes, tactical police units had secured the entire Sinclair Institute, preventing any staff from leaving or destroying evidence. The forensic examination of Room B7 revealed industrial-scale organ trafficking infrastructure. The oversized furnace contained bone fragments and dental work from multiple individuals, evidence that would eventually provide DNA matches to 17 of the 47 documented victims. Financial records seized from Dr. Lim's office detailed transactions with organ brokers across Southeast Asia, with recipients primarily wealthy individuals in countries where legal organ transplants faced years-long waiting periods. The operation had generated $31 million over 23 months, far more than initial documents suggested. Dr. Lim had been systematically falsifying treatment records, convincing desperate patients to try his experimental protocols while knowing the procedures had minimal success probability. When patients inevitably declined, he would accelerate their deaths through medication adjustments and premature life support withdrawal, timing their demise to coincide with organ recipient availability. Most victims came from specific demographics that Dr. Lim had identified as vulnerable. International patients whose families lived abroad and couldn't easily verify treatment progress, elderly individuals estranged from relatives who rarely visited, terminally ill patients who had exhausted conventional options, and whose deaths would surprise no one. Each murder had been carefully orchestrated to appear as natural disease progression or treatment complications. Singapore's Ministry of Health launched parallel investigations that exposed systematic regulatory failures. Dr. Lim's basement operations had functioned for nearly 2 years, despite the city-state's supposedly rigorous medical oversight. Inquiries revealed that Building C's basement renovation had been approved based on falsified documents claiming the space would house medical archives and equipment storage. Actual construction had been conducted by foreign contractors who left Singapore immediately upon completion, making them unavailable for questioning about the room's true purpose. The Sinclair Institute's management claimed complete ignorance of Dr. Lim's activities, a defense that rapidly crumbled under investigation. Financial records showed the Institute's directors had received substantial unexplained bonuses correlated with periods of high organ trafficking activity. Several senior administrators were charged with conspiracy and criminal negligence for failing to question obvious irregularities in patient outcomes and basement facility usage. The two security guards present during Rosa's murder cooperated with prosecutors in exchange for reduced sentences, providing testimony that detailed Dr. Lim's recruitment tactics. Both men were former military personnel from neighboring countries, hired specifically for their willingness to follow orders without moral questioning. They described a compensation structure where bonuses were paid for special facility management tasks, euphemistic language for witness intimidation and evidence disposal. Their testimony revealed that Rosa was not Dr. Lim's first discovered witness. Two other staff members over the preceding year had stumbled onto suspicious circumstances. One had been convinced through a combination of bribes and threats to remain silent. The other had simply disappeared, his absence explained as voluntary resignation and return to his home country. Investigators were now reopening that case as a potential second murder. The Filipino community in Singapore responded with collective grief and rage. Rosa Santos became a symbol of the vulnerability faced by foreign workers who discovered wrongdoing in environments where their immigration status made resistance dangerous. Her photograph appeared at vigils outside the Sinclair Institute, surrounded by candles and flowers, her gentle smile preserved in dozens of memorial images. The Philippine embassy fought for Rosa's body to be repatriated with full honors, eventually succeeding despite bureaucratic obstacles. Her funeral in Iloilo City drew thousands of mourners, including government officials who praised her courage and demanded justice. Rosa's family, thrust into international spotlight by circumstances they struggled to comprehend, established a foundation in her name to support Filipino healthcare workers facing ethical dilemmas abroad. Her younger sister, inspired by Rosa's sacrifice, enrolled in law school with plans to specialize in international labor rights. The trial of Dr. Marcus Lim became a media spectacle that gripped Singapore for 8 months. His defense team pursued a strategy of partial admission, acknowledging the organ trafficking while claiming that all organs came from patients who were genuinely deceased from natural causes. They portrayed Dr. Lim as a brilliant physician whose desire to maximize organ availability had led him to cutting bureaucratic corners rather than committing murder. This defense strategy collapsed under forensic evidence. Medical examiners testified that multiple victims showed signs of premature life support withdrawal, patients whose vital organs were still functioning adequately, but who had been systematically euthanized. Medication records revealed Dr. Lim had administered drug combinations designed to suppress respiratory function while maintaining organ viability. The testimony of family members provided devastating emotional impact. The Malaysian businessman's widow described the phone calls she had received from Dr. Lim, his sympathetic voice explaining that her husband's recovery was progressing slowly. That continued treatment justified the mounting expenses she dutifully paid. Learning that her husband had actually been dead for months, his organs sold to strangers while she clung to false hope, destroyed something fundamental in her. She would sit in the witness stand, tears streaming silently down her face, unable to articulate the depth of betrayal she felt. The verdict delivered on May 17, 2023, was unanimous. Dr. Marcus Lim was convicted on 47 counts of premeditated murder, multiple counts of organ trafficking, fraud, and corruption of medical practice. The murder of Rosa Santos carried additional charges of witness elimination and obstruction of justice. The judge's statement during sentencing reflected the profound shock the case had delivered to Singapore's self-image as a lawful, transparent society. "You betrayed every principle of medical ethics," the judge said, his voice heavy with disgust. You transformed a place of healing into a slaughterhouse, motivated purely by greed and enabled by your patient's desperate hope. The sentence is life imprisonment without possibility of parole, the maximum penalty allowable under Singapore law. Dr. Lim showed no emotion as the sentence was delivered, his face carrying the same detached calm he had displayed throughout the trial. Only when being led from the courtroom did he glance back at Rosa's family in the gallery, his expression suggesting curiosity rather than remorse, as though even then he could not comprehend what he had truly done. The Sinclair Advanced Medical Institute never recovered from the scandal. Within months, it closed permanently, its assets liquidated to provide restitution to victims' families. The building that had housed Dr. Lim's operations stood empty for 2 years before being demolished, the site eventually converted into a memorial park honoring medical ethics and patient rights. Regulatory reforms followed with unprecedented speed. Singapore's Ministry of Health implemented new oversight protocols requiring unannounced inspections of private medical facilities, mandatory third-party auditing of patient outcomes, and whistleblower protections for healthcare workers who report suspicious activities. Rosa Santos's death directly prompted legislation requiring all foreign medical staff to receive training in reporting mechanisms and legal protections available when they witness wrongdoing. Today, Rosa's photograph hangs in the lobby of several Filipino nursing schools, accompanied by text describing her courage and the impact of her final act. Medical ethics classes across Southeast Asia use the Sinclair Institute case as a cautionary study in how institutional prestige and individual brilliance can mask systematic evil. Students are reminded that a physician's duty to do no harm begins with absolute honesty, and that no medical advance justifies compromising human dignity. The questions Rosa's story raises continue to echo through Singapore's medical community. How could such atrocities occur in one of the world's most regulated healthcare systems? What other horrors might hide behind the sterile walls of prestigious institutions? How do we protect vulnerable workers who discover wrongdoing in environments where speaking up threatens their livelihoods? These questions demand ongoing vigilance, ensuring that Rosa Santos's courage and sacrifice catalyze permanent change rather than temporary scandal. In the end, the woman who came to Singapore carrying dreams of healing and hope had exposed evil that no one wanted to acknowledge. Her death was not the accident Dr. Lim had attempted to stage, but a murder that would be remembered as the catalyst for transforming how an entire nation approached medical oversight and justice. Rosa Santos had saved far more lives in death than she could have during any nursing career, by ensuring that 47 voices, silenced by cremation and lies, would finally speak their truth. The golden boy of Singaporean medicine had become its most infamous monster, and the humble Filipino nurse he murdered to preserve his secret had become an enduring symbol of moral courage that transcends nationality and status. The rosary that fell from Rosa's pocket during her final moments remained as evidence throughout the trial, then was returned to her family. Her mother kept it in a glass case beside Rosa's nursing diploma and the commendation letter she had received from Dr. Lim, praising her exceptional dedication. The contrast between those documents, one celebrating false excellence, the other representing genuine faith, told the complete story of what had transpired in the basement of the Sinclair Institute. Evil had worn the mask of medical prestige. Truth had arrived carried by a young woman whose only weapons were courage and conscience. And in that basement corridor where Rosa Santos took her final breaths, fighting to expose a monster, she had achieved something that transcended her own survival. She had proved that one person's integrity could tear down empires built on exploitation and murder, that some principles are worth dying for, and that the powerful, no matter how untouchable they seem, will ultimately face justice when ordinary people refuse to be silenced. Thank you for watching this video. If stories of courage and justice matter to you, Please consider joining our YouTube membership to support our continued investigation into true crime cases that deserve to be remembered. Don't forget to subscribe and tell us in the comments. What would you do if you discovered your workplace was hiding a terrible secret? Your engagement keeps these important stories alive and honors the memory of people like Rosa Santos, whose bravery changed the world.